What if everything you thought you knew about power was a carefully constructed illusion? Imagine for a moment that the kings, the rulers, the billionaires, the politicians, and the so-called powerful individuals in our world are not in fact powerful at all. Instead, they are mere actors in a grand play. Their strength and influence are granted to them not by their intrinsic qualities, but by our collective belief in them. What if power, that force which shapes empires, alters the course of history, and can even crumble entire civilizations, does not exist in any tangible form? What if power is not something we can touch, hold, or grasp, but instead something that exists only in the mind, something that relies on our shared perceptions? For centuries, we have been conditioned to accept power as a concrete reality. We behave as if power holds weight, as if it exerts control over our lives and societies. We build institutions around it, structure our lives according to it, and even bow to it. But what if this belief is nothing more than an illusion, a mirage that has been constructed over generations, a trick of the mind that we have all collectively agreed to play along with? What if, in reality, power is not something that belongs to a single individual or group, but rather something we choose to give to those who seem to hold it? This is not a new idea. In fact, thinkers from different cultures and eras have explored this concept in depth. One of the most notable figures to examine the nature of political power was Al-Farabi, the great philosopher of the Islamic Golden Age. He argued that political authority is not something that is inherent to a ruler or monarch. Instead, it depends on the will of the people. Power is not something a ruler can possess in the same way that one might own land or wealth. It is rather a perception, a shared belief that exists only as long as we, the people, continue to accept and support it. As Al-Farabi observed, a ruler's authority is not absolute, it is contingent upon the collective will of society. Building on this notion, Ibn Khaldun, the father of modern sociology, took this concept even further. He contended that leadership and authority are not fixed qualities, but rather cyclical forces that rise and fall in response to shifting beliefs. For Ibn Khaldun, the power of a ruler is dependent on the strength of the social group that supports him. When that collective belief in a ruler's authority wanes, the ruler's power dissolves, much like a mist evaporating under the heat of the sun. This cycle of rise and fall is inevitable, as human societies are always in flux, and with each shift in the collective consciousness, the foundation of power crumbles and gives way to new forms of leadership. These ideas are not confined to the Eastern philosophical tradition. Western thinkers, centuries later, arrived at similar conclusions. The famous Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, for example, believed that power is not an inherent quality of an individual or institution, but rather a projection of the collective unconscious. Power, according to Jung, is something we impose onto others. It is not something we possess within ourselves. It is a collective projection of our desires, fears, and beliefs. In other words, we create the power structures around us by projecting our own internal beliefs about authority onto those who occupy positions of power. Similarly, Michel Foucault, the influential French philosopher, argued that power is not something held by individuals, but something that exists within the structures of society. Power, for Foucault, is embedded in the way we organize ourselves, the rules we agree to follow, and the systems we create to maintain social order. Power is not something a king, a president, or a CEO holds in isolation. It is a force that permeates all aspects of social life, from the language we speak to the institutions we create. When enough individuals reject the social norms and structures that uphold this power, the power itself ceases to exist. The moment we stop playing the game itself vanishes. Let's look at history to understand this dynamic more clearly. The Soviet Union, once one of the most powerful superpowers in the world, collapsed not because it was invaded or conquered by external forces, but because the people lost faith in its authority. This massive empire, armed with nuclear weapons and a military might that could have crushed any opposition, disintegrated not through physical conflict, but through the collective disbelief of its citizens. When the people of the Soviet Union stopped believing in the legitimacy of the state, its power evaporated overnight. Similarly, consider the example of a corporate CEO. This individual may sign documents, make decisions, and command a vast workforce, but if the faith of the employees, the investors, and the customers vanish, the CEO's power disappears just as quickly as it was gained. Even in our everyday lives, we can see the fragile nature of power. Consider the example of a police officer. Why does a police officer command obedience? It's not because the officer is physically stronger than the average person, nor is it because the officer possesses some mystical or supernatural force. It is because we, as a society, have collectively agreed that a police officer holds authority. The uniform, the badge, and the law they represent are all symbols that rely on our collective belief in their power. Without that belief, a police officer is simply another person on the street. Likewise, consider the authority of a judge. When a judge issues a ruling, it is not because they possess some inherent quality that makes their decisions automatically binding. It is because society has agreed to give them the power to make judgments and enforce laws. The moment that collective belief in the legitimacy of the judicial system breaks down, the power of the judge dissolves. The judge becomes just another individual in a robe, and the authority of the court becomes meaningless. So what does this mean for us as individuals? If power is indeed an illusion, then who truly holds it? If all human authority is based on perception, then what happens when we stop believing in it? Does society descend into chaos, or does something else happen? Is it possible that when we awaken from this collective illusion, we can finally see the truth, that real power does not belong to any human authority, but to something beyond us? Al-Ghazali, one of the greatest thinkers of the Islamic world, warned against attachment to worldly power, for he understood that it is fleeting and deceptive. He taught that true power belongs only to the divine, the ultimate and eternal authority that exists beyond the illusions we create. Even Carl Jung, in his exploration of the psyche, suggested that the pursuit of power over others is ultimately meaningless compared to the inner work of understanding oneself. True strength, Jung argued, comes not from dominating others, but from mastering the self. So I ask you to reflect on this. What if we stopped giving away power? What if we recognized it for what it truly is, a mere illusion, a fleeting shadow cast by our collective minds? And if human power is nothing more than a collective dream, then who or what truly holds it? Reflect on these questions. Think about what power really means and how it shapes the way we live, work, and interact with one another. What would happen if we saw through the illusion of power and woke up to the truth? Would we find ourselves more free and more empowered, or would we simply fall into a new kind of chaos? The answers to these questions are yours to explore. If you liked this video or benefited from any of the content, I humbly ask that you kindly hit the liked button and subscribe to my channel to get up-to-date content that will make you think and reflect. Thank you.